Some stories don't wait for history. They flare up out of dust and gunsmoke. A single strike of violence, and suddenly, a name no one had heard becomes a force everyone swears they know. In the Old West, fact traveled on foot, fame traveled by press, and the faster story always won. Long before Hollywood minted the American gunfighter archetype, frontier newspapers had already built one out of a man named James Butler Hickok, piece by piece, headline by headline. This is how an icon was assembled, and how the making of a legend can eclipse the man who lived the truth. Legends hardly ever start the way people think. They don't often rise from a single gunshot or a perfect moment. They gather slowly like a storm. Dozens of small moments, retold just right, until the person at the center is larger than life. James Butler Hickok was a man like that. Born on a small Illinois farm, he spent his boyhood shooting targets and dreaming of the frontier. By his early 20s, he had already lived through scrapes with outlaws and desperados. First, working as a stage driver, and then joining up with the Union Army, earning a reputation as someone who didn't rattle easily under pressure. His courage and attitude had loosely earned him a nickname, Wild Bill. And in 1861, a violent confrontation at Rock Creek, Nebraska, added another story to the growing stack. A deadly dispute with a rancher named David McCandless that ended in gunfire and chaos. Frontier storytellers seized on it immediately, polishing the moment until Hickok sounded like something more than he was. According to storytellers, when McCandless threatened Hickok with a beating, Hickok allegedly growled back, "There will be one less son of a bitch when you try that." Whether he said those words or not didn't matter. What mattered was that McCandless ended up dead, and Hickok walked away with another story attached to his name. The stories, the violence. Individually, none of it made him famous, but together, they created something else entirely. The perfect fuel for a legend. All that was missing was the spark. 4 years later in Springfield, Missouri, the powder keg exploded. A local gambler named Davis Tutt took Hickok's gold pocket watch as collateral for a debt he claimed Hickok owed him. Hickok didn't deny there was money owed between them, but he warned Tutt not to parade the watch around town. Tutt ignored the warning. He wore the watch openly, repeatedly, each time daring Hickok to react. Hickok finally warned him. If he did it again, there would be trouble. On July 21st, 1865, Tutt did exactly that. The two men stepped into Springfield's town square, facing off at nearly 70 yards. There was no Old West ritual, no countdown, just two armed men standing in the open, waiting for the other to move. Tutt fired first and missed. Hickok steadied himself and put a single shot through Tutt's heart. He stood motionless for a moment, pistol still raised, the dust settling around him. Right here in this very spot, James Hickok became Wild Bill. His duel in 1865 with Davis Tutt made him a frontier legend overnight. To those who witnessed it, and to everyone who heard the story after, this wasn't just another frontier dispute. This was the turning point. The moment James Butler Hickok stepped out of everyday life and into something much larger. Colonel George Nichols was a Civil War officer turned writer, sharp, ambitious, and always hunting for the kind of frontier material that people back east devoured. In late 1866, while traveling through Kansas, he kept hearing one name repeatedly, Wild Bill. Nichols tracked Hickok down in Fort Hays and interviewed him for hours. Hickok told stories, some true, some dusty from the trail, others shaped by the way memory hardens around violence. Nichols listened and then did what storytellers do. He embellished. In February 1867, Harper's new monthly magazine published Nichols' profile of Hickok. It was long, dramatic, and unlike anything the average American had ever read. Hickok became a superhuman marksman, a man who stared down death the way other men looked at weather. Nichols took moments such as the Rock Creek fight, where Hickok had shot a single man, and rewrote it into a blazing last stand, claiming Hickok killed 9 or 10 attackers by himself. Other boasts were stitched together from rumor. Some never happened at all, but the country believed every word. Harper's reached millions. Newspapers reprinted the story. Dime writers circled like sharks. Hickok went from a well-regarded frontier scout to the national image of what a Western gunfighter looked like. Wild Bill became shorthand for danger, accuracy, and a kind of impossible cool under pressure. Hickok later admitted that half the article was nonsense, but it didn't matter. Nichols had already carved him into the American imagination. From this point forward, Hickok wasn't just a man. He was a character, one he would spend the rest of his life trying to live up to. The Harper's article changed Hickok's life instantly. From that moment forward, every room he walked into came with expectations. The icy eyes, the calm gunslinger who never missed. People didn't want James Butler Hickok. They wanted Wild Bill. Hickok sometimes learned to navigate it to his advantage. He signed autographs. He performed on stage, reenacting scenes that never happened from his own legend. The attention opened doors, brought him work, and put money in his pocket. For a time, Hickok served as a peace officer in some of the roughest frontier towns. Wild Bill's trail eventually led up here to Abilene, Kansas, the wildest cow town on the frontier. It's here he was at the height of his legend, and how he solidified himself as the man we know him today. But after accidentally killing Deputy Marshal Mike Williams during a confrontation with another man in Abilene, Hickok never wore a badge again. Williams's death haunted Hickok the rest of his life, and the same reputation that built him also poisoned the edges of his life. Young drifters and drunks challenged him constantly, trying to make their own name off the fastest gun in the West. Hickok grew tired of it, but he couldn't escape it, especially as age, hard drinking, and failing eyesight began stripping away the very talents the legend depended on. By the early 1870s, Hickok had been arrested more than once for vagrancy and disorderly conduct, an aging gunman living in a shrinking world, while his printed legend kept growing. He drifted from town to town, job to job, carrying a name that no longer matched the man wearing it. Less than 10 years after his feature in Harper's magazine, James Butler Hickok was no longer the superhuman that Nichols had created. On July 2nd, 1876, he walked into a Deadwood saloon wearing a famous name and fading abilities. During a routine poker game, he sat with his back to the door, something he never would have done as a younger man. Jack McCall, a drifter who later claimed Hickok had killed his brother in Abilene, stepped in from behind and fired a single shot. Hickok died instantly, a sudden, violent end for a man that the world had rewritten into a myth. James Butler Hickok died in that chair. Wild Bill lived on without him. Legends gather slowly like storms. They are wild, and they strike savage blows.